So today, we're in Luke. Still, last time in Luke chapter 12 for this go round. And so, let's set the stage here. So, there's two sections for us today. The first is Jesus is continuing to speak to his disciples. So last week, he was talking to his disciples, and he ended up with talking about that parable of the servant of the steward who was caring for his fellow servants, and then the contrary of the servant who was not. But he's continuing to speak to his disciples here, and then at some point you'll hear, as I'm reading, that he turns and starts talking to the crowd. So there's a separate section that flows, but is a separate section. So that's what we're looking at today. This whole chapter has had this kind of hanging over it. There's been this thing about the end times are here. We are looking forward to what is going to happen. We are looking forward to the throne room. We are looking forward to Jesus coming back and wrapping this whole thing up. Jesus hasn't even gone to the cross yet, which we'll see is interesting, but we are already looking forward to that day of the Lord. Terrible day of the Lord, it says in some places. So let's go ahead and read this. So we are going to read from chapter 12, verse 49 to 59. All right. I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is accomplished. Do not suppose that I came to grant peace on earth. I tell you, no, but rather division. For from now on 5 members in one household will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. And he was also saying to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say, a shower is coming, and so it turns out. And when you see a south wind blowing up, you say, it will be a hot day, and it turns out that way. You hypocrites, you know how to analyze the appearance of the earth and the sky, but how do you not analyze this present time? And why do you not even on your own initiative judge what is right? For while you are going with your opponent to appear before the magistrate, on your way there, make an effort to settle with him, so that he may not drag you before the judge, and the judge turn you over to the officer, and the officer throw you into prison. I say to you, you will not get out of there until you have paid the very last cent. So this is an interesting text. So let's dive in here. All right. The first thing he says, I have come to cast fire on the earth. So there's a lot of people who wonder what he means by fire. I read at least 5 different things. They were interesting. One was, the Spirit. Maybe the Spirit's the fire. Maybe there's, something else going on. But I have trouble hearing a lot of those reasons based on where we are here in this text. I think the fire is that it's the purifying fire that we read about in Malachi 3, right? The purifying fire that causes us to be purified. It's the persecutions and afflictions and strifes that accompany the introduction of the gospel to the world. That's the fire that he's talking about. this matches with the rest of this short section. This is a result of what Christ is doing when he says this, right? He is on his way to the cross. And when that happens, there is going to be a fire. There's going to be fire on the earth. There's going to be pain and suffering. He will not be separate from that either. And then in the Old Testament, like I said, in Malachi, there's fire is not the goal. So in Malachi, you have this fire that's a refiner's fire and the fuller's soap, right? You have this fire. The fire is not the point. Jesus is saying, yes, I have come to cast fire on the earth, and I wish that it was already kindled. But the fire isn't the point. In the Old Testament, anytime there's fire, it's meant to purify. It's meant to make you better suited or able to be present with God. That is the point of the fire, is that it allows us, that suffering, that whatever, the antagonisms, the afflictions, all those things are meant to make it possible for us to be more like Christ. That's the goal. So we're going to see that as we go through here. He's saying a bunch of things, but always keep in mind what the goal is. He's saying these things happen. I do cast fire upon the earth, but it's not because I want to burn up the earth. I don't want fire. I want purity. I want righteousness. That's what I want. That's why I'm sending fire. And so then this means that the fire isn't the intent. But also, it's not unexpected. He is expecting fire. He's expecting suffering. He's expecting affliction. But that's not the point. It's not the reason. But you should expect it. In fact, Jesus' comment means that he knows that this fire will be a result of his coming. He's already there. Of the breaking into of the kingdom that he is announcing and bringing near. He is saying, this fire is coming because I am doing this. The kingdom cannot come and there not be fire. And so he's saying, I want the fire because I want the kingdom to be here. And Jesus also says that it isn't completely there yet. I wish that it were kindled. So when will it be kindled? In verse 50, he says, and he starts with this conjunction, but, right? So he says, I have come to cast fire on the earth, and how I wish that it were already kindled, but, and then he says, I have a baptism to be baptized with. I have a baptism to be baptized with. This is not the baptism like we think of. This isn't being dunked in the water. John already did that. He's already been baptized by being in the water. This isn't the coming down of the Spirit. That's already happened. When he came up from the water, the Spirit had already come down on Jesus. He is expecting a baptism of baptisms. And that means he is expecting suffering. He is expecting to be immersed in suffering. And we know that this is what is happening. This is where he is going. This is looking forward to his death. We have to remember here, I'm trying to say this every week, this section that we're in, these chapters that we're in Luke, Jesus has set his face toward Jerusalem. That is primary in his mind the whole way. He has set his mind on Jerusalem, and he has set his face on the cross. He is headed to the cross. This is not a mistake. The cross was not a mistake. The cross was not it wasn't not according to his will. He has set his face on Jerusalem, and he is going there, and it's not a mistake. And here he points to it and says, I still have this baptism to undergo. And when I do, that fire will be kindled. And so we are in a different place than his disciples were at, because we are no longer waiting for that fire. That fire has been kindled. In verse 50, so in verse 50, he also says this baptism, this immersion, this in suffering, this going to the cross, he tells us that he knows his death will begin a new age. It will begin a new age, that will be marked by suffering and persecution. That didn't start yesterday. That started 2,000 years ago when Christ died on the cross. That is when this all started. And so we see in 49 that he wishes that he had already started, And now he says, again, just how ready he is for this to happen. The second half of 50, but I have this baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is accomplished. So we need to look at that word distressed. I think distressed is an okay word in the translation because it makes sense how distressed I am that it be accomplished. It's okay, but I think we need to make sure that we understand that Jesus is not distressed that it's going to happen. He's not distressed that he's going to die on the cross. He's not worried about that happening. He is distressed that it hasn't happened yet. He wants it to happen. He is anxious for it to happen in the best sense of the word anxious. He wants it to happen. He's distressed. The word is found in other places in the New Testament, that word that we translated here, distressed. In Acts 18:5, it says that Paul devoted himself or pressed himself completely to the study of the Bible. That word, devoted, pressed, that's the same word as Jesus says when he says he's distressed. He is devoted, he's pressed to the study of the Bible. And in 2 Corinthians 5:14, Paul tells us that the love of Christ controls us. The love of Christ constrains us. That control and that constrain, that is that same word that Jesus says that he is waiting for, that he desires for that baptism to happen. Jesus is saying here that he is devoted, controlled, constrained, pressing toward that baptism of suffering happening. And as a result of that baptism of suffering, the new age comes where there is fire kindled on the earth. That is what Jesus is saying. He is saying, this is what I want. So while I would not say that the goal of Christ is to bring fire on the earth, he is pressing on to bring the thing that will be the result of the fire of the earth, the kingdom. The kingdom will come, and he wants that to happen, and it will cause division, which is that next section, right? 51 to 53, which brings us there. Do you suppose that I came to grant peace on the earth? That's what Jesus says. Do you suppose that I came to grant peace on the earth? Now, actually, back in chapter 1, when John the Baptist is born, he's named John, Zechariah receives his speech back, and then he prays, and he prophesies, and what does Zechariah say? Zechariah says that God promises, he gives promises for his son, and then prophesies about the one that his son, John, would point to, which is Jesus. And although he didn't know who it was, and he said, because of the tender mercy of our God, who will guide our feet in the way of peace through the Son. So don't hear this as Jesus saying, I'm not about peace. He is about peace. He is there to bring peace, but that peace is the end goal. So this is kind of the opposite of the previous, where the fire wasn't the end goal. He wanted something else, the kingdom. Here, peace is the end goal, but he can't just bring peace. Peace doesn't make any sense if there's still people who don't live in the kingdom. And so he's saying, Jesus in this verse does not say that he is bringing division because division is his goal. He's saying that division is the result of my coming and dying, but I won't be stopped because that division will come, right? He knows that division will come, and that won't stop him. He is still devoted to being baptized in his suffering. He's still devoted to that. So Jesus is devoted to that division. So we have here, do you suppose that I came to grant peace? I tell you, no, but rather division. So, yes, he's bringing division. That's not what he wants, but he's not going to stop bringing what he is going to bring because that division will come as well. So he will bring division. And then he says, sorry, I'm getting lost here. And then he goes into 52 and 53. And he gives some examples of how this division will be apparent. He says that the division will not just be between nations or races. This isn't division at the biggest level. It's not between religions, races, nations. It's not like that. This division cuts right through families. His example is of a family, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3, father against son and son against father. He's saying this division that he's bringing will come right through the middle of families. And in fact, I'm going to add here that Jesus and Paul too say in other places that this knife, this dividing knife, this two-edged sword, if you will divide straight through us, our beings. It will cut through our hearts. This division happens all the way down to where it matters. This division that he's talking about is not warfare writ large, it's warfare in us. Jesus is saying that this division will happen. It isn't the goal. Peace is really the goal, but this division is necessary consequence to achieve peace. And he will not be stopped by the consequences. He will not be stopped by the division that happens. He doesn't want it necessarily, but he's also not going to be stopped by it. This is him saying, I want the goal. There is bad stuff that we have to get through to get to the goal, and I am ready to do it. I'm ready for that to happen because the goal is so important. So what divisions are we talking about here? I think it's pretty simple. Jesus' advent here, his announcement of the kingdom being near, and his death on the cross require a decision to be made by each of us. They require a decision. And some will decide to believe and reorganize their lives around the advent and the events of Jesus' coming, but others will not. That is what this division is about. And that is the cutting edge. And the cuts are painful. But we must be like Jesus and not be put off by those cuts. There are going to be people that we desire to be part of the kingdom who are not. I think of your brother. I think of my son. There are people that's going to happen. And I hate it. That's not too strong a word. But it has to happen for Christ's kingdom to come. And Jesus was not put off by it, and we should not be put off by it either. And note that this division is caused by our choice to believe by ourselves. It is not something that we do to make it painful. We don't go out of our way to make this division. It just happens because we decide that we are going to follow Christ, right? We don't have to cause this division to be painful. It is. But we need to make the decision. We don't have to go out of our way to smack people on the head or anything like that. We just need to see. We need to decide to follow Jesus, and this other stuff will happen, and it's sad, but it's already painful. It's painful already. So now Jesus turns to the crowds. He's been talking to the disciples, right? He's been talking to people who have made a decision to follow him. And now he turns to the crowd who's been hearing him talk to the disciples. And he starts with this second section with kind of a strange thing, doesn't he? He starts with a curious observation. He points out that the people around them, are able to analyze their surroundings. They're able to look at what's going on around them in the world, on earth, the wind and the rain, and the wind and clouds and all that sort of stuff. We're able to look at that and get a picture of what will happen. He says that when you pay attention and observe your surroundings, that you can accurately predict the weather for the day. That's what he says. You can. People do that. We have weather forecasts now. And what do we use that information for? The same thing that they did. We use that information to prepare ourselves, our schedule for the day. Oh, it's going to be raining, so I'm not going to do that. I'll do this. Or, oh, it's going to be really hot. I'm not going to wear a coat. I'm going to wear shorts, right? We make decisions about what we do based on these things that we look around and we see, and we make a prediction about our day. And so we change who we are or what we're doing that day. And we do this automatically. And Jesus is saying, you guys do this automatically. You already set into motion actions for your day based on your looking around, seeing what's obvious, making a prediction about what's going to happen the rest of the day. So what does this have to do with anything he's been talking about? Well, we now get to the he turns to them and he says, you hypocrites. His response to that is, you hypocrites. And I tell you, this week, it took me a while to how does this make any sense to call them hypocrites because of this? But it does make sense because he asks two questions of them. He says, how do you not analyze this present age? And why do you not, even on your own initiative, judge what is right? So he calls them hypocrites because he calls them hypocrites. Like he's already told in this chapter, he's called lawyers hypocrites. How? Jesus is showing that when they are honest in their observations and seeking, they can analyze and determine what actually will happen in the weather. And these same people say they are seeking the signs of the Messiah coming. But they're not being honest with their questions and observations at the times, and so they're not seeing him. They're not finding him. They're saying they are being dishonest. They are saying we want the Messiah, but they're not actually being honest with their questions about the times around them. And so they miss Jesus. They say that they're seeking Messiah, but they do not honestly do so. If they were, Jesus said they would see him. Just like with the weather, if you actually paid attention, you can predict. And he is saying, if you were actually paying attention to the times, you would see me. So what are his questions? You can do it with the weather. How can you not do it with looking at the signs of the age? And why do you not on your own seek out what is righteous or just or right? If you were seeking the signs of the Messiah, you would find them. If you actually wanted to have justice in your community, you can identify it. Why are you not actually seeking what is right? Why are you not more concerned with the same things? Why are you more concerned with the same things as the rest of the people around you are seeking? Why are you swayed by the arguments of those who are not honestly seeking the Messiah? There is a division. We need to know who is actually on our side of the divide. Not just take a quotation of the Bible or some words spoken as proof, but look at the whole of what the people say. Does everything they say indicate they are seeking the Messiah? Their whole life needs to seek the Messiah. Even what they say has to be seeking the Messiah. Someone can't just say, I'm a Christian, and then you just take what they say. Because you need to be honest in seeking the Messiah. You need to know who's on your side of the divide. We can't just take their word for it. We need to be honest in our questions of their lives. If we did this better, more often, we would probably have fewer pastors who at some point fall, right? If people were actually honestly asking them, they wouldn't have been putting any trust in them. You need to know who is on the right side. We are not careful enough about our own we are not careful enough on our own account of looking for what is right. We need to look for what is right, not people who claim to be right, but what is right. And then Jesus ends with this thing, 58 and 59. For while you are going to your opponent to appear before the magistrate, on your way there, make every effort to settle with him. So is this practical advice? Is this a practical instruction about what to do when someone's taking you to court? Is that all this is? Is practical advice on how to deal with people in our world? I don't think so. Look at what we've been talking about. Be wise and seek the correct things on the way to the judge. Correct things on the way to the judge. This is not a practical instruction. Well, it is, but it's not just a practical instruction. This is a parable. Who is the person? Who is the opponent? Who is the judge? Well, what has Jesus been concentrating on for this whole chapter? What has he been calling us to? This is not about day-to-day life. This is about where we are in this age. The opponent is Jesus. I don't think we like to hear that. The opponent is Jesus. We miss this because we, like the disciples, consider Jesus to be on our side. But Jesus is talking to the crowd here and to us. But the opponent is Jesus. Who is it that says in Matthew, "Go away, I never knew you"? That's Jesus. Jesus is the opponent of those who come up. Jesus is the opponent of the goats. Jesus is the opponent. We need to see ourselves here walking beside Jesus toward the throne of God. That's what this is about. This is not just some practical advice. This is about being honest with where we are in the age, the current age. Are we an opponent of Jesus? And this is saying, if you are, deal with it. Deal with it now. Because when you get to the throne, it's too late. This whole thing has been aiming up to this point. This is about, we need to be just as determined and just as concerned about what Jesus is about as Jesus is. We need to want that to happen. This parable is tied to this section. You are walking along with your opponent, Jesus, walking beside you toward the throne of God. Jesus' warning is clear. If you don't ask honest questions about what is going on around us in this age, if we don't honestly seek to find the Messiah on the way, when you reach the throne of God, it will be too late. And so that means when we're on the way, we need to be paying attention to the person who is going with us, Jesus. We need to be paying attention to him and not the people around us. We need to be paying attention to him, trying to be more like him. He is it. Should be our whole world. We should be so looking at this age that we find him, the Messiah. And if we aren't, and if we find him to be an opponent in any matter, we need to deal with that now, right away. Don't wait. Deal with it now. Make the decision now to change everything in your life. Every time something comes up that you're like, Jesus is my opponent in this facet of my life, that has to change. have to allow that to change. You have to make the decision to change that. That's what this is about. That's what it means. I mean, we've been in this paragraph and we've been talking about the servants waiting for the master to come back. We've been talking about what does it mean to seek what God is about, to know what is coming, to all those things. We've talked about that in this chapter many, many times. And here at the end, Jesus is saying, if you find me to be your opponent in any facet, deal with it now. Deal with it now. Now, I'm not going to talk about if you leave any one facet there, what happens to you. But the last verse is pretty clear that it's enough to be concerned about. I say to you, you will not get out of there until you have paid every last cent. I don't know what to do with that, honestly. I don't know what to do with that. But it's enough of a warning to me that when I find myself in some place thinking something that Jesus doesn't think, or thinking something that makes me an opponent to Jesus, I am not going to let that stand. That warning is too big. And I do want to be one who is honestly seeking the Messiah. So there's both sides. There's I don't want Jesus to be an opponent because I'm afraid of what would happen if he is. And there is also, I don't want Jesus to be an opponent because I actually want what he wants. That is what this is calling us to. That is what it means to be ready for Christ to return, to be looking out, to be concerned about that. It means actually paying attention to your life and finding the places where Jesus is your opponent and correcting it, making the decision to correct it, because he will accept us. He wants to accept us.